We did it, ladies and gentlemen. We're at the pinnacle. Game 7 Stanley Cup final. It doesn't get any better than this. And that's why on the Monday episode of the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast, we're diving deep into the Stanley Cup final preview, best bets, and everything you need to know headed into Monday night's final. Let's get this paper.
You're Locked On Fantasy Hockey, your daily podcast on fantasy hockey.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Oh, baby. Steele, it's Game 7, my friend. And if you're not fired up for tonight's action between the Florida Panthers and Edmonton Oilers, you really do need to check your pulse. Shout out to the everydayers making us your first listen every single day. Welcome back inside the lab, everybody, to the Monday episode of the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast. I am joined, as always, by my distinguished co-host, Mr. Steele Roden. On this side of the microphone, it's your boy, Big Flip Livingstone. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Make every moment more as all of the playoffs wind down. Sports don't stop, and you can keep betting on them all summer long at FanDuel, who's hooking up all customers with a boost every single day. That's right, there's something for you every day all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Oh my goodness me, Mr. Roden. How have we gone all the way through fantasy draft prep season, all the way through to the Game 7 finale of the sport we love so much? We're going to talk a little bit about it, how they got there, what we're looking at for tonight's Game 7, but also we got our same game parlays, wrapping it up, Steele, our last bets of the season. Feeling a little bit nostalgic here, my friend, but there's some news here to be talked about because Sergei Bobrovsky, I'll spit it out, wasn't skating on Sunday ahead of this massive tilt tonight. We record a little early. We don't know what the Monday morning news is. This is obviously a concern. Anthony Stolarz might be pressed into duty here, Steele. It comes down to this, and I'm putting it right to you right now. The pressure is on the Florida Panthers. The Edmonton Oilers are playing with house money. What do you think about this Bobrovsky situation, and what is your overall vibe heading into this pivotal Game 7?
It's a scary situation for Florida Panthers fans and Florida Panthers organization if Sergei Bobrovsky is not in the crease. I mean, for him to miss this practice the day before, maybe it's him just getting rest and the coaches giving him some time off to regroup and mentally prepare for the game ahead in the most crucial fashion ever. But it is a little bit worrisome that Sergei Bobrovsky was not at practice. Again, not a common thing for this team right now, and especially for Sergei Bobrovsky at a time like this. So, you know, with Anthony Stolarz not playing a single game in the postseason, he came into a game relieving, earlier in the Stanley Cup Finals. But it's been Sergei Bobrovsky the entire way. I've talked about Anthony Stolarz a lot throughout the season and the fantasy value that he brings to the team and him being one of the best tandems alongside Bobrovsky in the NHL. I picked them as the best tandem for how they played in the regular season. But it's a scary thing because the playoffs is a different beast. And when you are coming in cold into a Stanley Cup final situation, again, he did relieve Sergei Bobrovsky in that 8-1 loss victory for the Edmonton Oilers. It's a scary situation because you don't know what you're getting into, as well as now that the Florida Panthers have lost all momentum in this Stanley Cup Finals, going up 3-0, letting the Edmonton Oilers come back and tying it up and forcing this Game 7. I mean, again, we said this for Game 6. There's got to be a ton of butterflies floating around in the stomachs of the Florida Panthers right now because, again, with this information with Sergei Bobrovsky and now going to a Game 7, it's definitely nerve-wracking on the Florida Panthers side of things.
We don't know what's going on with Bob. Obviously, everything hush-hush. Anthony Stolarz and Spencer Knight were the goaltenders on the ice in Sunday morning's practice. We'll see what happens tonight, but we do know this, Steele. This Florida Panthers team is pushing for its first Stanley Cup in its history, and I just want to tee it up like this. This is the 18th Game 7 in Stanley Cup final history. The last since moving to the best-of-7 format in 1939. Home teams in those Game 7s, Steele, 12-5, and the last time there was a Game 7, the St. Louis Blues took down the Boston Bruins on the road in 2019, and before that, the Penguins actually took Game 7 against the Red Wings in 2009. Hey, They went through the Tampa Bay Lightning in 5, Boston in 6, and the New York Rangers in 6 to get to this final. And I want to tee up also the Oilers, who obviously, Steele, this season have had the turnaround. Look, all of these angles have been covered at length. Every single detail has been analyzed and covered. So we're going to try and continue to bring you some fantasy angles on the rest of today's episode. I got a question for Steele to pick your brain on Sam Reinhart and what do the Panthers do if they blow this one, Steele? Because there are some salary cap questions coming up for Bill Zito, and we love Billy Zito in the front office, but he has his work cut out for him. The Edmonton Oilers dispatched the LA Kings in 5 games, Vancouver in 7, and then a very good Dallas Stars team in 6 to get here. I don't know what you're thinking about headed into tonight. We're going to get the bets as well. All that needs to be said, Steele, is if you're a hockey fan, considering how much this series was going to go out in a whimper, this Game 7 has all the trimmings of being an absolute masterpiece.
It is going to be a masterpiece. And alongside of that, it's also going to be one of the most soul-crushing experiences for one of these organizations, because when you look at it from the Florida Panthers side of things, and especially with the Florida Panthers, this could go down if they lose Game 7 as the most devastating collapse in sports history in the last decade, at least, probably ever, honestly. It will be the greatest collapse in sports history from what we saw them do last year. Coming back in that first round series against the Boston Bruins, winning it in 7, going all the way to the Stanley Cup Finals, losing to the Vegas Golden Knights, and then coming all the way back next season to the Stanley Cup Finals, going up 3-0, and then losing 4 straight. There have only been 4 teams, I believe, in the National Hockey League postseason that have been able to come back from an 0-3 deficit and that have won. And one of them being, again, the 1942 Toronto Maple Leafs in the Stanley Cup Finals when they were down 0-3. We'll take that one. But again, Florida Panthers, this would be the greatest collapse in sports history. Again, from what we've seen in our lifetime, but probably in sports history if they lose this Game 7 to the Edmonton Oilers. And then on the flip side of things, pun intended there, for the Edmonton Oilers, again, being 30 plus years now that the last Canadian national hockey team has won a Stanley Cup Finals. They were down 0-3 in this situation. They fight, they claw back to tie it up just to get beat in a Game 7. It would be soul crushing to Edmonton Oilers fans, Canadian fans out there who are cheering them on. Again, whichever way the page goes, whatever the page it folds, it's going to be heartbreaking for an organization, especially for the Florida Panthers. It means so much to both these teams. But again, speaking on the Florida Panthers, it would be the greatest collapse in sports history.
Can't wait to see it all unfold. The rest of this episode is going to unfold as such, taking a look at the same game parlays. I got a couple of Game 7 trends and some stats to take a look at heading into tonight's massive tilt. I also need to ask Steele about what Bill Zito should be doing with his big free agent tickets in Brandon Montour and Sam Reinhart, because I don't know about you, Steele, but checking at these stats, Sam Reinhart has been putting up goose eggs the last 3 games. So I got to talk to you about his fantasy value right after the break. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel Sportsbook. We love sports, and we love them so much, we never want them to stop. And as the playoffs wind down, there's fewer games. However, all the sports and sportsin is what we want. And at FanDuel, it lets us keep going with all the sports betting we want. All we got to do is bust open the app, dream up some bets whenever we're in the mood, and it's good to go. This summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a bonus bet daily. That's right. Something for everyone every single day all summer long. Head to FanDuel.com/lockedon. Start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball.
And thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. Flip and I really do appreciate all that love and support you show us Monday through Friday. Make sure you go show that love and support over to the Locked On Sports Today podcast, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you every day with the biggest stories 24/7. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't miss analysis, news, opinions, streaming 24/7 on YouTube, or you can also find it on the free Amazon Fire TV channel app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. Once again, thank you so much for tuning in for today's episode of Flip and I. Go hit the subscribe button, the follow button, leave a 5-star review. Go follow us on the Instagram account, Locked On Fantasy Hockey Pod. We're throwing up all the hockey playoff content up there. We're going to get all the mock trades, mock drafts, free agency coming up, draft season coming up. There's so much to talk about this coming week, actually, right after the Stanley Cup Finals. It's going to be a busy next weekend in the NHL. You got the NHL award show, you got the draft, you got free agency. There's so much going on in the next week and a half.
Sounds like we're about to be busy, Steele.
We are going to be busy is what we're saying. So make sure you're tuning in for all the hot content here on the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast. But continuing the conversation of the Stanley Cup Finals, Game 7 action. I know you want to talk about Sam Reinhart, Bill Zito, everything going on in the organization for the Panthers right now. So I'll throw it back over to you to lead off with this next segment.
Vladimir Tarasenko, Sam Reinhart, Kyle Okposo, Ryan Lomberg, Nick Cousins, Anthony Stolarz, Oliver Ekman-Larsson, Dmitry Kulikov, Brandon Montour, all UFAs, Steele. Obviously, there's some bigger names on that list than others. Right at the top, everyone's talking about him. Sammy Reinhart, 28-year-old UFA, excuse me as I try not to burp here. All I got to say is, Steele, going 0-0-0, 0-0-0-0, no points, no assists, no goals over the last 3 games now in a row for Sam Reinhart. I know that he has had a pretty solid postseason. I believe he has 9 goals. I think that's what I saw there. So far in the postseason, 9 goals, 6 assists, 15 points in 23 games. Really can't hate on it. But if they do what they are right now trending in the direction of doing and blowing this bad boy, I can't wait to hear about your bets. By the way, we're going to get there in a few minutes. You can't help but feel, Steele, that this is going to be a situation where Bill Zito takes a long, hard look at how he handles this roster. And I'm not saying anything like drastic changes. Why would you do that when the team is so good? I'm just saying there's not a ton of money to go around, and Brandon Montour is going to command some cash. That's an important angle. Anthony Stolarz, look, they've got $4.5 million tied up in Spencer Knight, and Anthony Stolarz played really well last year and is going to be looking to get some money. So there are some angles here that Bill Zito is going to have to handle. And if Sam Reinhart is not heard from here in Game 7 whatsoever, Steele, he might be taking a longer look at perhaps trying to sign him for much cheaper, going to give Brandon Montour his money and maybe letting him walk. I don't know how that breaks down. What do you think about that take? Because also right now, if this Florida Panthers team does cook it and totally blows this, there are going to be a number of really intriguing fantasy pieces here, Steele, that are still so valuable that will lose some of that shine headed into next draft season. And I don't mean Barkov, but I mean some of their lower pieces. And you might be able to swoop in there and get them at a very good round.
100%. And I'll start off with Sam Reinhart because that's the most intriguing to me right now. Like you said, in the last 5 games, he only has 2 points. And that came, I believe, in game 3. Yeah, Game 3 for the Florida Panthers where he had a goal and assist. But in the last 5 games, he only has 2 points. He's a -5. Again, hasn't been not good enough, not shooting the puck enough as well, and what he does best on the power play. From what we've seen in the regular season. And this is why, again, the playoffs is such a hot topic. And it really does matter for negotiations and contract negotiations going into the next season, because again, you can do as well as he did in the regular season. I believe he had 94 points. Yeah. 94 points, 57 goals. And we've talked about Sam Reinhart's future next year fantasy value and what it's going to mean. We both agreed, I believe, that he's not getting 57 goals. Again, he's not getting 50 plus goals. Same could be said for Zach Hyman. Zach Hyman had a great regular season. He's having a great postseason with 16 goals, which is, I believe, the highest in the salary cap era, above Sidney Crosby and Alexander Ovechkin.
Correct.
He's also not going to get 50 plus goals the next season. I mean, it's possible, but it's very unlikely that he does that.
Hard to replicate.
Very hard to replicate. And
I would lean towards Hyman being able to do it, though, for obvious reasons.
Oh, yeah, for obvious reasons. 100%.
However, the point holds true. I feel this is a Chris Kreider situation from a couple of seasons ago.
That's exactly what it is.
Plus, and we knew it was going to be a good year, but not 50. So I'm here with you on this take.
That's exactly what it is. And the same can be said for Sam Reinhart right now, because he has never been over a 35-plus goal scorer besides this past season, Only twice now, 2 times in the last 3 years, he's gotten 80-plus points. Other than that, he's been a perennial 50 to 60, 65 on the high side point per season type of player. He's been that type of player throughout his entire career. Obviously, being with the Florida Panthers the last 3 seasons, it sent his value and his trajectory on a very high level, playing alongside Matthew Tkachuk, Barkov, Sam Bennett, all these guys, Carter Verhaeghe. I completely understand that, but he's not going to get 94 points again. So the fantasy value for him going into next season, you got to be wary about how high you take Sam Reinhart. Of course, he's going to be great on the power play. Of course, he's still going to get his points, but 94 was a little bit of a higher trajectory than I think what we all saw him doing. And now that we're seeing him not perform in the playoffs, especially when the time matters most in the Stanley Cup Finals, it also wonders where you're going to draft him in next year's fantasy draft board. But it also matters on what Bill Zito is thinking right now about for his next contract. I think at this point in the season, again, it's all gonna get talked about right after the Stanley Cup Finals. Maybe they take a week off in short order. But at this point, I feel like Brandon Montour has to be the top priority for them on the blue line, as well as Sam Reinhart being that number 2 guy. Sam Reinhart, he could be looking towards $10 million on this contract.
Sure. Why not?
And that's a little bit high, especially with only $20 million in cap space. And like you said, they've got Spencer Knight at $4.5 million over the next 2 seasons. Even though Anthony Stolarz played such great hockey this regular season, there's going to be a few other teams that come after Anthony Stolarz because of what he performed and what he produced for the Florida Panthers. So I don't think he'll be back. There's going to be a few other guys that aren't back. It'll be interesting to see what Oliver Ekman-Larsson does. And like you said, Kulikov, all of these older guys, 32, 33, and Brandon Montour, who's 30 years old as well. It's going to be interesting to see who they sign on the blue line next season. But for me, top priority should be Brandon Montour, because what he brings on both sides of the ice and the potential that he's shown us over the last 2 seasons. And then with Sam Reinhart kind of dogging it in the Stanley Cup Finals now, it's going to be interesting.
I think it would be the safer play to maybe invest in your blue line that way. Taking nothing away from 57 goals from Sam Reinhart, and a guy who also led the league in playoff scoring, or I'll spit it out, power play scoring. There we go, Steele. Hey, it's tough to nitpick and try to take away from his value, but it has to be discussed because Bill Zito, as mentioned, he knows what he's doing, and he's handled this roster like a magician up till this point. But it all is going to play into his fantasy value, so I had to talk about it right before we go to break and talk about bets. Couple of Game 7 trends for the head top. The team that scores first in Game 7 in the Cup Final in Stanley Cup history is 149 and 48 for a winning percentage of 756. Steele. Home teams 115 to 82 in edge in all-time Game 7 in Stanley Cup playoffs. And let me spit out this one. 102 of 197 all-time Game 7s in the Stanley Cup playoffs have been decided by a 1-goal margin. That right there is going to play into me bets. Why don't you take us there, brother? Because I'm ready for these same game parlays. You're on mute.
The mute button, of course, gets me again. But we are ready for bets. We are ready for Game 7 action of the Stanley Cup Finals right after the break. But first, this episode is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and so much more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. And once again, thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. Continue to hit the subscribe button, the follow button, leave a 5-star review. We appreciate all that love and support you show us Monday through Friday. 7 o'clock in the morning is when you can find our episodes. Flip big time bets where the money is made. I made some money on game 6. I went a perfect 3 for 3 with the Zach Hyman anytime goal, the over 5.5, and the Oilers win. So I'm feeling this parlay going into game 7. But over to you, my friend, because you're the guru. You're the same game parlay master. I'm feeling what you're bringing over the last 6 games in the Stanley Cup Finals.
Appreciate that.
Let's hear your parlay.
Well, last game out, I chickened out. I took the Florida Panthers on the puck line plus 1.5 for some rinky-dink odds, and they got pumped. And look, I don't even care. I'm going to do it again, but I'm doing it with the Edmonton Oilers at plus 1.5 as my first pick on the parlay. Minus 270. Obviously, these odds are not good, but put them together and you're going to get almost a payout of plus 300. So let me just spit out all 4, including my lock of the night. First or second pick, in addition to Edmonton plus 1.5, is the under 6.5. I'm teeing it up once again. I like it at 6.5. This one's going to be close, Steele. It's going to be a 1-goal game. There's going to be nerves in the building for both teams. I also, if I had to, I would lean to no goal in the first 5 minutes, but I'm already taking enough juice. So Oilers plus 1.5. I think they take this one, Steele. That's the hand that I'm leaning towards. The momentum is just too crazy. I've been wrong now 3 times in a row. I've picked Florida to win or on the puck line, and they've burned me. And here I go with the Oilers, but whatever, man. The momentum has swung. You can smell the poo-poo in the shorts for Paul Maurice's club. This is really, really hard to come back from. And if Anthony Stolarz has to go in there, oh, baby, you better jump on these odds now because they're going to change in a hurry. So Oilers plus 1.5, under 6.5. How can you not take Connor McDavid anytime point? It's minus 500 for anytime point. So putting it alone, almost taking it at all is not worth it. But along with that and my lock of the night, Leon Draisaitl, once again, his shot total has been banging for me. He has 3 or more shots in 4 of the last 6 games in this series. Leon Draisaitl, lock of the night. He is actually paying minus 138 for 3+ shots. I'm loving Draisaitl to have a big game. He's going to have to if this Oilers team wants to make some offensive noise. No goals in the series. Lock of the night, that's going to get you a payout of plus 278. I don't know what you're feeling there, but I'm loving those picks.
I'm loving the picks. I'm loving the under 6.5 because it banged out for both of us last time. You picked the under 6.5. I picked the over 5.5.
We'll take it.
And that's exactly what I'm going with again. I'm going with the over 5.5 at plus 122 right now for my first pick.
Let's have it happen again, Steele.
It's been over 5.5 the last 3 games, so I'm absolutely feeling that. I'm also going with the Edmonton Oilers money line. Like you said, the momentum has swung in big favor for the Edmonton Oilers. I picked the Oilers the last time. It banged out for me. I think this will become the greatest storyline in the last decade in National Hockey League, especially. But we're about to see the greatest collapse of the Florida Panthers. But we're also about to see Connor McDavid be crowned the greatest hockey player of all time if he wills the Edmonton Oilers from down 0-3 into a game 7 and wins the Stanley Cup. He will be crowned, and that's why I'm also going with the Connor McDavid anytime goal as my lock of the night. Baby. That will get you a same game parlay of plus 533. Juicy. I'm loving the odds on those 3 picks. Again, Edmonton Oilers money line over 5.5 in this matchup. Lock of the night, Connor McDavid anytime goal.
Let's have a big night, Steele. I just want to see a good game. You and I aren't nearly invested into these 2 teams as others, perhaps, that we would have been invested in if this was Game 7 featuring other clubs. It's not, and one of the things that I've noticed is if you want to talk about the Bruins, Leafs, and other teams that were left on the cutting room floor after the first couple of rounds, they are not in this caliber of teams as the Florida Panthers and Edmonton Oilers, and it's not even close. So these 2 teams deserve to be where they are. The Florida Panthers come into this one a nervous bunch, Steele, and the Oilers are playing with house money. Let's see how that goes down. I'm excited to see it.
Game 7 comes tonight. Can't wait for game puck action to get going. We are so excited about the next week and a half in the National Hockey League. So much to talk about, but of course, we're waiting for Game 7 puck drop. Thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. Continue to listen on a daily basis. Also, go check out Locked On Sports Today, the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. You can also find it on the free Amazon Fire TV channel app. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. finally, want to thank you again so much for tuning in for today's episode
Mm-hmm.
with Flip and I. Have a great day. Good luck with all your bets out there, and we shall see you back here again tomorrow.